Friends, before we dive into this powerful tale, a small request: if it touches your heart, please subscribe, like, and drop your city or state in the comments. It means the world to know we're all connected through these stories. The aroma of roast duck with apples filled the dining room. Rich, buttery, comforting to anyone else. To me, it was a cruel reminder of my own helplessness. I sat at the head of the table in my own home, right arm encased in plaster, the fractured radius throbbing with every heartbeat. The cast felt like a cold weight, alien and heavy. My plate, fine bone china with gold rim, a set my late husband and I bought in the French Quarter 40 years ago, remained empty, pristine. To my right, Tavarius occupied my husband's high-backed velvet chair. He sawed at the duck with savage enthusiasm, grease shining on his chin, fork and knife clattering. His guests, 2 men and a woman from City Hall, ate in tense silence, eyes down, aware of the storm brewing. My husband taught her a lesson. My daughter Havisha said calmly, slicing a cucumber without meeting my gaze. Tavarius laughed loud and entitled. Mama brought it on herself. Old bones, poor coordination. She tripped heading to the attic. Lucky she didn't break her neck. The guests offered tight smiles. No one dared serve me. I stared at the grandfather clock, my father's heirloom ticking perfectly. 7:59 p.m. 10 minutes earlier, the doorbell had rung. Tavarius opened it, expecting the notary he'd summoned at 8 sharp to force the deed transfer. Instead, he faced judgment. Governor Thorne, he stammered, voice cracking. Cassius Thorne stepped inside, silver-haired now, lines etched deeper by time and duty, but the same steel eyes that once looked up at me from an operating table 30 years ago. In his hands, a modest bouquet of blue hydrangeas. He walked past Tavarius as if he were furniture. His security detail, 2 imposing men in tactical gear, flanked the doorway. Cassius approached me directly. He knelt beside my chair, suit brushing the floor, and covered my good hand with his. Miss Ophelia, he said softly, voice trembling the crystal. You said you fell. You didn't say you were starving. He rose, eyes scanning the untouched plate, then my cast. His jaw tightened. Without a word, he claimed the head chair. Tavarius scrambled aside. Cassius cut the duck with surgical precision, portioning it neatly. He lifted a forkful to my lips. I ate. The warmth spread through me, chasing away the gnawing hunger. Then, quietly, who taught Miss Ophelia this lesson? Tavarius babbled excuses. Accidental fall, stairs, though our condo had none, old age, dementia. I spoke clearly. There are no stairs here. Cassius's gaze turned lethal. He held up my X-ray to the chandelier light. The fracture line screamed defensive, arm raised to shield the head from a descending blow. I served 2 tours, Cassius said. I've seen falls. This isn't one. He ordered an immediate audit of Tavarius's accounts, contracts, everything, starting 5 minutes ago. Tavarius exploded. Lunging toward me in panic, Cassius rose a wall of quiet power and Tavarius recoiled. Then the red folder, the deed of gift from 2014. The condo belonged to the City Hospital Board in memory of my husband. I retained lifetime residency. Tavarius had beaten me for nothing. His world collapsed. He crawled, begged, blamed Havisha. She, in turn, accused him, claiming victimhood. I recounted the night, her hissing, "Shut up, old fool. The neighbors will hear," while I lay in agony on the floor. The audit uncovered more. His illegal basement warehouse in the historic building, counterfeit goods, stolen property. Guards cuffed him. He was dragged out screaming. Havisha was told to pack essentials. A driver would take her to a hotel. She could not approach me during the investigation. The apartment fell silent, clean, cool, like an operating room after a successful procedure. Cassius and I sat with tea. The worst was over. Just one thing, I said. He leaned forward. The fork. He slid the untouched red velvet cake closer. With my left hand awkward, trembling, I picked up the silver fork. I broke off a piece and ate it myself. Tavarius had mocked my helplessness. I proved him wrong. I was not helpless. I was a surgeon who had waited for the infection to ripen before excising it, even if the diseased part was family. Sometimes amputation saves the life. Tick-tock, tick-tock. My new life had begun. Dear listeners, that is Ophelia Vance's story, a reminder of how long a strong woman can endure and how swift justice arrives when patience ends. Was it too harsh, or exactly what dignity demanded? Where does family loyalty end and self-preservation begin? Tell me in the comments. What city are you from? Did this resonate? If you enjoyed it, a like, subscribe, or super thanks helps me share more. See the recommended stories on screen. With love and respect, until next time, I want to ask you one small favor. If what you're about to hear stirs something deep inside you, anger, recognition, sorrow, or quiet triumph, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me which city, state, or country you're listening from. It always warms my heart to see how far these stories travel and how many of us are connected by them. Now, take a slow breath and let's begin. The smell arrived first, thick, golden, almost obscene in its richness. Roast-up skin-crisp mahogany, stuffed with apples that had softened into sweet, fragrant surrender. Butter, sage, black pepper, a whisper of cinnamon. To anyone walking past the open window on that warm evening, it would have promised celebration, family, abundance, love. But inside apartment 12B, on the top floor of the old brick building that overlooked the river, that smell was not comfort. It was punishment. I sat at the head of the table. The place that had belonged to me and my husband for 43 years, and I could not lift a single bite to my mouth. My right arm rested uselessly beside my plate. Heavy plaster wrapped it from knuckles to just below the elbow. The cast was still new enough that the edges were sharp. They caught on the linen tablecloth every time I tried to shift. Beneath the plaster, the fractured radius bone screamed with every heartbeat. I knew the anatomy better than most. I had seen hundreds of X-rays just like this one during my 32 years as a neurosurgeon. I had repaired worse. But knowing the shape of the break did not make the pain smaller. The plate in front of me was bone, white china with a delicate gold rim, part of the set we bought in New Orleans in 1984, during the one trip my husband and I ever took that wasn't for a medical conference. The plate was empty, perfectly humiliatingly clean. To my right sat Tavarius. He had claimed my husband's chair, the tall, dark velvet high back that still carried the faint impression of Robert's shoulders after all these years. Tavarius had unbuttoned his charcoal suit jacket. His shirt strained across his chest. Sweat already gleamed along his hairline and under his collar. He gripped the carving knife and fork like weapons, sawing off enormous slabs of duck, chewing with his mouth slightly open, grease shining on his lips and chin. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, not even pretending to use the napkin folded beside his plate. Around the table sat his guests, 2 men and 1 woman, all subordinates from the city housing department. They ate with heads lowered, forks moving in small, careful motions. They did not look at me. They barely looked at each other. They knew exactly who Tavarius was, and what he could do to their careers with one phone call. My husband taught her a lesson, Havisha said. My daughter's voice was calm, almost sweet. She sat to Tavarius's left, wearing a beige dress that drained the color from her skin. She was cutting thin slices of cucumber with surgical neatness, never once lifting her eyes to mine. Tavarius laughed, a loud, barking sound that filled the room and bounced off the high ceiling. She brought it on herself, he announced to the table, as though telling an amusing story at a barber shop. Old lady thought she could still climb up to the attic. I told her, "Where are you going, Mama?" But no, she doesn't listen. Legs get tangled. Down she went. Lucky she didn't break her neck. He laughed again. The guests produced thin, polite smiles, the kind people give when they are afraid not to. I tried to move the fingers of my left hand. They obeyed. But the heavy platter of duck sat in the exact center of the table, far beyond my reach. Asking for help would mean begging, and I had promised myself, lying on the hallway floor 24 hours earlier with my arm on fire, that I would never beg this man for anything again. "Pass Ms. Ophelia some duck," one of the younger men, Marcus, said quietly. He wore glasses. His voice trembled just slightly. "Stay out of it, Marcus." Tavarius snapped. He poured himself another generous measure of cognac. The bottle clinked against the crystal glass. Ms. Ophelia is on a very strict diet today. Therapeutic fasting. Excellent for clearing the mind. "Isn't that right, Mama?" He turned to me. His eyes were cloudy with liquor and something darker, triumph. I met his gaze. I did not blink. I did not speak. Havisha finally looked up. "It was an accident, Mama," she said, voice small. "But it was a necessary lesson. You have to learn to listen to the head of the family now. You aren't at the hospital anymore. You don't give the orders here." My stomach twisted, not only from hunger, but from something colder and deeper. I had not eaten in almost 24 hours. Not since the moment Tavarius demanded the deed to this condominium, and when I refused, threw me against the hallway wall with such force that my arm snapped against the doorframe. I still remembered the sound. A dry, clean crack, like a dead branch giving way in winter. The antique grandfather clock stood in the corner. My father's clock. It had never lost a minute in 60 years. The second hand moved with merciless precision. 7:59 p.m., 10 minutes earlier the doorbell had rung. Tavarius had stood up, swaying slightly, wiping his greasy mouth with the napkin he had finally remembered to use. "That's the notary," he announced proudly to the table. "Right on time. 8 o'clock sharp. We'll sign the papers, and then we can finish this beautiful meal in peace." He walked to the door with the confidence of a man who believed the world bent to his will. He was wrong, because the man standing on the other side of that door was not a notary. And in exactly 1 minute, Tavarius would learn who had always been in charge. I allowed myself the smallest of smiles, so faint it barely moved my lips. The clock ticked. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, more insistent. Not the polite double chime of a delivery man or a neighbor. This was a demand. The sound vibrated through the crystal glasses on the table, made the chandelier above us shiver with tiny, musical protests. Tavarius pushed back his chair with a scrape that set my teeth on edge. He stood, swaying just a fraction. The cognac had reached deeper levels now, and flashed a triumphant grin around the table. "See," he said, voice booming with false generosity. "Punctual. That's how business gets done. 8 o'clock sharp. Let's get this little formality over with so we can enjoy the rest of the evening like civilized people." He winked at Havisha. She exhaled in visible relief, shoulders dropping as though a weight had lifted. One of the guests, the woman, even managed a small, hopeful nod. Tavarius straightened his jacket, smoothed his tie with greasy fingers, and strode toward the foyer. His footsteps were heavy, confident, the tread of a man who believed the next few minutes would solve all his problems. I did not move. I did not speak. I simply watched the empty doorway he disappeared through, counting the seconds in my head the way I used to count sponges and instruments before closing an incision. 7, 8, 9 from the hallway came his voice, loud, welcoming, oily with practiced charm. Come in, my friend. We've been waiting. Hope the papers are ready. Our old lady's been a bit cranky, but family business, you know how it is." The sentence ended abruptly. Not faded. Cut off. As though someone had placed a hand over his mouth and squeezed. The apartment went still. Marcus froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. The woman set her glass down so carefully the stem didn't even clink. Havish's hand trembled. A single drop of wine trembled on the rim of her glass before falling to the pristine tablecloth like blood. I heard breathing from the foyer. Not Tavarius's usual heavy, arrogant huff, but something thinner, panicked. A wheeze. Then the words, small and broken, "G. Governor Thornton, sir." The name landed in the dining room like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Governor Cassius Thorne. The portraits of him hung in every city hall office, every government building across the state. The man who had signed bills that reshaped entire districts. The man whose signature could open prisons or close factories. The man feared by developers, respected by judges, and whispered about in back rooms from the Capitol all the way down to the riverfront bars. And he was standing in my hallway. Tavarius's voice tried to recover, tried to slide back into its usual bluster. "What an honor, Governor, sir!" We weren't expecting, if I'd known you were coming personally, it's just a family dinner, nothing fancy." His words tumbled over each other, tripping, falling. Then came the sound of boots. Not dress shoes, not loafers, combat boots. Heavy, deliberate, rhythmic, moving across my hardwood floor with the certainty of soldiers who had walked into worse places than this and come out alive. 2 sets, then a third, slower, more measured. The guests at the table exchanged glances, quick, terrified flicks of the eyes, before dropping their gazes back to their plates. They understood instantly. Whatever was about to happen, they were now witnesses to something career-ending. Something that could never be unseen or unheard. 2 figures appeared first in the doorway to the dining room. Massive, black tactical gear, no visible insignia, but posture that screamed training, shoulders squared, hands loose but ready, eyes scanning every corner of the room with cold professionalism. They took up positions on either side of the archway like stone sentinels. Then he walked in. Cassius Thorne had aged, yes. The hair was fully silver now, cropped military, short. Deeper lines framed his eyes and mouth, the kind carved by decades of decisions that cost lives or saved them. But the frame was still broad, the carriage still that of a man who had once carried wounded soldiers across sand under fire. He wore a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it looked like armor. And in his large, scarred hands that had once shaken when I pulled shrapnel from his skull 30 years earlier, he held a small, almost humble bouquet of wild blue hydrangeas. Their color stood out sharply against the gray wool, Tavarius backed into the room ahead of him, half bowing, half stumbling. Please come in, Governor. Havisha, stand up! Everyone up! The governor himself. No one moved. The guests remained seated paralyzed. Havisha rose halfway, then sank back down as though her legs had forgotten how to hold her. Cassius did not pause. He did not acknowledge Tavarius's babbling. He walked straight through the space as though the smaller man were invisible. A coat rack, a shadow, nothing of consequence. His eyes found mine immediately. He crossed the room in long, unhurried strides. The floorboards creaked under his weight. The clock ticked louder in the sudden hush. He stopped beside my chair. For a long moment he simply looked. At the empty plate, at the cast, at the untouched food spread across the table like a taunt. Then his gaze settled on my face. I saw the muscle jump in his jaw. I saw the color drain from his cheeks, leaving the skin tight and gray. This was not mere anger. This was something older, deeper. The rage of a man who remembers exactly who pulled him back from death and now sees that same woman diminished, starved, broken. Slowly, so slowly it seemed to pain him, Cassius Thorne, governor of the state, master of its laws and its prisons, lowered himself to one knee on my hardwood floor. His suit touched the ground. He did not care. He set the hydrangeas gently beside my plate. Then, with infinite care as though I were made of glass, he covered my left hand with his right palm. His skin was warm, steady. The hand of a soldier, the hand of a survivor. Miss Ophelia, he said. His deep baritone made the crystal tremble again. You told me on the phone that you fell. A pause. The room held its breath. But you didn't tell me, he continued, voice dropping to something softer, more dangerous, that you were being starved in your own home. He did not shout. He did not need to. The words were enough. Tavarius made a small, wet sound from somewhere behind him. Half laugh, half choke. Governor, sir, there's been a misunderstanding. Cassius did not turn. He did not even glance over his shoulder. He simply rose. The movement was fluid, controlled. He straightened to his full height, a head taller than Tavarius, and stepped to the head of the table. To my husband's chair. He placed one hand on the high velvet back. He waited, no words, no command, just presence. Tavarius stumbled backward so fast he nearly overturned Havisha's chair. He gave up the seat without a fight, without even a token protest. Animal instinct recognized the apex predator and yielded. Cassius sat. The chair did not creak under him. He filled it as though it had always been his. He shook out a fresh linen napkin with a crisp snap, spread it across his lap. His eyes flicked to the utensils Tavarius had left behind, greasy, scattered. With one finger he pushed them aside in disgust. One of the security men materialized at his shoulder like smoke. From inside his tactical vest he produced a small travel set of gleaming steel cutlery. He placed it silently before the governor. Cassius reached for the duck platter. With one smooth pull he drew the heavy dish toward himself. He lifted the carving knife and fork. His hands, those same hands that had trembled on my operating table 3 decades ago, were rock steady now. Not hacked, not tore. He separated the meat with precision, slice after surgical slice, portioning it into small, neat bites the way one prepares food for someone recovering from anesthesia, someone too weak to feed themselves. The room remained utterly silent except for the soft scrape of knife against porcelain and the ticking of the clock. When the portion was ready, Cassius speared the most tender piece and turned to me. There was no pity in his eyes, only respect. Deep, quiet, filial respect. Please, Miss Ophelia, he said softly. My cheeks burned. To be fed like a child, in front of these people who had watched me starve, who had laughed or looked away, should have felt humiliating. But there was such dignity in his gesture, such deliberate care. The shame receded like fog before sunlight. I opened my mouth. The duck was warm, salty, rich with apple and fat. My empty stomach clenched in gratitude. I chewed slowly, swallowed, felt life return to my limbs in small, warm waves. He offered another piece, then another. Only when the sharpest edge of hunger had dulled did he set the fork down. He wiped his hands. Then, without turning, without raising his voice, he spoke one word into the silence. So. It landed like a gavel. Who among those present is the author of the lesson Miss Ophelia received? Tavarius made a sound that was half laugh, half cough, wet, desperate, the noise a man makes when he realizes the floor beneath him has suddenly vanished. Governor Thorne, come on, sir. Seriously, he tried to inject his usual swagger into the words, but they came out cracked, falsetto at the edges. What lesson? It's just a figure of speech, family business, domestic trivialities. You know how it is. He took one tentative step forward, trying to angle himself into Cassius's line of sight, as though proximity could somehow restore his authority. Mama's getting up in years, you understand. She gets confused sometimes, forgets where she is. Coordination isn't what it used to be. Yesterday she went to get water at night and stumbled, tripped on the stairs. We were terrified. Wanted to call an ambulance right away, but she refused, said it would pass. Havisha nodded vigorously beside him, a bobblehead doll desperate to agree. Yes, exactly. Poor thing. We take such good care of her, Governor. Treat her like royalty. The Castwell bones get brittle with age. Life happens. Tavarius forced a smile, wide, oily, the smile that had gotten him through countless budget meetings and backroom deals. Sweat rolled from his temple, tracing a dark line down the side of his face. He wiped it away with the back of his hand. Surely you see, sir. Just an unfortunate accident. We're a close family. Cassius did not respond immediately. He sat perfectly still, napkin still spread across his lap, fork resting beside the half-eaten portion of duck he had prepared for me. His eyes remained fixed on Tavarius, not angry, not yet, simply waiting, the way a surgeon waits for the bleeding to slow before making the next incision. The silence stretched, thickened, became unbearable. Then Cassius spoke, voice low, conversational, as though discussing the weather. No stairs. 2 words. Tavarius blinked. The smile froze on his face. I am sorry, Governor. Cassius tilted his head slightly, the smallest movement. There are no stairs in this condominium. He said it slowly, each syllable measured, giving the words time to sink in. This is a single-level unit. No steps inside, no thresholds higher than an inch, and even those were removed years ago for accessibility. I had the floor plans pulled before I arrived, standard procedure when a call comes from someone like Miss Ophelia. Tavarius's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked wildly around the room, at the guests, at Havisha, at me, searching for rescue that wasn't coming. I meant figuratively, you know, metaphorically. She stumbled in the building hallway. Or I misspoke. Governor, sir, I'm under a lot of stress, the job, responsibilities. You know how it is. Cassius rose slowly from the chair. He was a head taller than Tavarius, broader. The room seemed to shrink around him. He walked forward, unhurried steps, until he stood directly in front of my son-in-law. Close enough that Tavarius had to tilt his head back to meet his gaze. Close enough that the scent of Cassius's aftershave, clean, cedar, military sharp, overpowered the lingering grease and cognac on Tavarius's breath. Lying to a public official is a misdemeanor. Tavarius, Cassius said quietly. Lying during an investigation is a felony. He paused, letting the legal weight settle. But lying to the woman who pulled me back from the edge of death 30 years ago. His voice dropped to something softer, almost intimate, and infinitely more dangerous. That is a sin, son, and I am a God-fearing man. Tavarius swallowed audibly. His Adam's apple bobbed like a buoy in rough water. Cassius turned away from him, dismissed him, and looked back at me. Miss Ophelia, he said gently. Your bag, please. I nodded toward the hallway. Havisha. Bring it. My daughter flinched at her name. She rose on unsteady legs, disappeared for a moment, and returned with my worn leather satchel. The one I had carried into operating theaters for decades. She held it out to Cassius like an offering. Inside pocket. I instructed. The yellow envelope. Cassius accepted the bag without looking at Havisha. His large fingers moved with care, unzipping, reaching in, withdrawing the thick manila envelope I had placed there that morning after the painkiller had dulled the worst of the agony enough for me to crawl to the wardrobe. He did not open it immediately. Instead, he held it in both hands as though weighing its contents. Tavarius, sensing the shift in momentum, tried one last rally. Governor Thorne, wait. Let's speak plainly, man to man, official to official. He squared his shoulders, forced his voice back into the register he used in boardrooms. I'm Deputy Director of Housing. We run this city. This state, you know how it is, nerves, pressure, constant oversight. And here, he waved a careless hand in my direction as though brushing away a fly. We're dealing with a family tragedy. Unfortunately, age takes its toll. Mental health issues, dementia's a terrible thing. Havisha caught the cue instantly. Tears sprang to her eyes. Not real tears, but the kind produced on demand. Yes, she cried, voice trembling. She attacks us sometimes, Governor. You have no idea what it's like living with her. She gets aggressive. Yesterday she threw a vase at Tavarius. We were just defending ourselves, trying to hold her so she wouldn't hurt anyone, including herself. That's how the arm happened. Cassius still did not look at them. He looked only at me. Waiting met his gaze. Nodded once. Open it, Cassius. He tore the flap carefully. Withdrew a single sheet, the X-ray film, black and gray, edges slightly curled from being handled. He held it up to the chandelier. The crystals caught the light and refracted it through the film. Every bone in my forearm appeared in stark relief. The clean shaft of the radius, the ulna beside it, and the ugly, jagged diagonal line slicing through the middle third. A defensive fracture textbook. Cassius lowered the film slowly. I served 2 tours in the desert, he said, voice flat, factual. I've seen men fall from trups, from rooftops, from cliffs. When a body falls forward, instinct takes over, hands shoot out, palms down. The fracture happens at the wrist. Distal radius. Compression. He tapped the film with one finger, exactly on the break. But this, he stepped closer to Tavarius. The smaller man pressed back against the china cabinet. Porcelain rattled softly behind him. This is a diaphyseal fracture midshaft. It occurs in exactly one scenario, when the arm is raised to protect the head from a direct overhead blow. A pipe, a bat, a very heavy fist. Tavarius opened his mouth. No sound emerged. Cassius tossed the X-ray onto the table. It landed in the bowl of potato salad with a soft plop. She didn't fall, he stated. She was blocking. The room exhaled as one. Tavarius's knees buckled slightly. He caught himself on the edge of the cabinet. Cassius turned his head, just enough, toward the head of his security detail. Major. The man stepped forward instantly. Call the district attorney. I want a full forensic audit of Deputy Director Tavarius's activities. Every contract, every signature, every taxpayer dollar for the last 5 years. Start with personal accounts. Cross-reference with any open investigations into housing irregularities. Yes, sir. The major already had his radio out. When do we begin? Cassius asked. 5 minutes ago. Sir. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Tavarius made a strangled noise. He understood. This was not dismissal, not a reprimand. This was the beginning of the end. Digital trails do not vanish. Bank transfer shell companies, kickbacks on construction bids. The basement storage he thought was so clever. All of it traceable. He exploded. You have no right. He screamed, spit flying. You can't do this. Who do you think you are? Governor or not, this is my house, my condo. I'm the master here. He rounded the table, eyes wild, fixed on me. And her? She's nobody, a dependent. I feed her, I pay the bills, I put up with her senility. I have rights, constitutional rights. Fear had burned away reason. Alcohol and panic ignited. He lunged, not at Cassius, at me. Perhaps to silence me. Perhaps to hurt me one last time. Perhaps simply because I was the nearest target for his collapsing world. Havishah shrieked. Thin, piercing. The major's hand moved toward his holster. Smooth, practiced. But Cassius was faster. He simply stood. No dramatic lunge, no raised voice. He rose to his full height and stepped between us. An immovable wall of wool, muscle, and quiet fury. Tavarius ran into that wall and recoiled as though he had struck concrete. He froze half a step away, breathing in harsh gasps, fists clenched, trembling. Cassius looked down at him. Sit, he said, one word. It was not a request. It was the command given to a dog that has forgotten its place. Tavarius's legs gave out. He dropped heavily onto the floor, right there, beside the table, clutching the edge of the tablecloth like a drowning man. The room rang with silence. Only his rasping breaths and Havish's quiet sobs broke it. I drew in a slow breath. The pain in my arm had not lessened. But now my mind was clear. Now came the truth. The question slipped from my lips quietly, almost conversationally, but in that ringing silence it carried the weight of a verdict. Tavarius lifted his head from where he sat crumpled on the floor. His eyes were bloodshot, glassy with shock and the remnants of cognac. Sweat had darkened his collar to near black, strands of hair stuck to his forehead like wet ink. Yeah, he rasped, clinging to the last thread of illusion he had left. Mine. By law. Havishah is the sole heir. As soon as you're gone, this place is ours. I already talked to realtors. I need that money. He spoke the last sentence like a confession, raw, desperate, stripped of pretense. Cassius did not react. He simply turned his head toward me. Miss Ophelia, he said softly, the red folder, if you would. I nodded. One of his aides, a younger man in a dark suit who had been standing unobtrusively near the doorway, stepped forward without being asked twice. He placed a thin cardboard folder bearing the faded city seal directly in front of me on the table, beside my now empty water glass. With my left hand, fingers still trembling from dessous and adrenaline, I opened it. Inside lay a single document, heavy bond paper, watermarked, yellowed at the edges by 10 years of quiet storage. The ink was still sharp, the notary's stamp crisp. I turned the page so Tavarius could see the header. "Read it," I said. He craned his neck, squinting through sweat-stung eyes. The title was simple. Deed of Gift Irrevocable, dated March 17, 2014. Grantee City General Hospital Board of Trustees, in perpetual memory of Dr. Robert Vance and in honor of 32 years of service by Dr. Ophelia Vance. Consideration, love, and affection, no monetary exchange. Encumbrance, life estate reserved exclusively for Ophelia Vance, full rights of residency, use and occupancy for the duration of her natural life. No sale, transfer, or encumbrance permitted without express written consent of the life tenant. Tavarius's lips moved silently as he scanned the lines. His face drained of what little color remained. "Yo, you gave it away," he whispered. "Yes," I answered. 10 years ago. After Robert passed, I knew the vultures would circle eventually. Distant cousins, opportunistic charities, even my own blood if greed took root. So I made sure this home could never be sold out from under me. Or anyone else. Havisham made a small, wounded sound, half gasp, half sob. "Mama," she breathed. "You gave the condo to the hospital." I met her eyes for the first time since the doorbell rang. "I gave it to memory," I corrected gently. "To the place that gave me purpose after your father died. To the patients I couldn't save if I retired broke and desperate. And yes, to myself. So no one could ever force me out." Tavarius rocked forward onto his knees. His hands clutched at the air as though he could physically tear the document apart. But you live here! You pay utilities!" I pay nothing," I said. "The hospital board covers maintenance, taxes, insurance, as agreed. I retain only the right to live here until I die, quietly, peacefully, without interference." The realization hit him in waves. First, the apartment was never his to sell. Second, the deed he had beaten me to sign was worthless. A ghost paper for a ghost fortune. Third, every blow, every humiliation, every hour he had starved me had been for nothing. He made a low, animal moan, the sound of something vital snapping inside. Then he lunged again, not at me this time, but at the folder. His fingers scrabbled across the table, knocking over a wine glass. Red liquid spread across the linen like spilled blood. Cassius's hand moved, swift, precise. He caught Tavarius's wrist mid-reach and twisted just enough to force compliance without breaking bone. Tavarius yelped. He collapsed back to the floor, cradling his arm. Cassius released him without ceremony and straightened the folder with one finger. "You beat her?" he said quietly. "For a piece of paper worth exactly $0 to you." Tavarius began to cry, not the dignified tears of remorse, but the ugly, snotty sobs of a man watching his entire scaffolding of lies collapse. "Miss Ophelia, Mama." He crawled forward on hands and knees, reaching for the hem of my dress. His fingers left wet streaks on the hardwood. "Forgive me. For God's sake, forgive me. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. It was nerves. The job. The pressure. They'll kill me, Mama. The people I owe, if I don't pay by tomorrow, they'll cut me into pieces. I don't have the money. I thought I hoped." He looked up at me with eyes full of terror and mucus. "Save me. Ask Governor Thorne. Let him give me an extension. I'll work it off. I'll wash your feet. I'll do anything." It was revolting. The same man who had called me an old hag, who had laughed while I starved, who had snapped my bone like kindling, now groveling like a whipped dog. I felt nothing but nausea. I pulled my feet back. Then he pivoted, desperate, vicious. "It wasn't me," he shrieked, jabbing a finger backward at Havisham without turning. "It's all her. She wound me up," she said. "Mother's old. She doesn't need the apartment. Let's sell it. Let's invest." She wanted the money for a new car, vacations, designer bags. I just wanted peace in the family. "Mama, believe me," something clattered. Havisham's fork hit the floor. She had gone white, chalk pale, lips bloodless. For a heartbeat she sat frozen. Then fury ignited. She surged to her feet, chair toppling behind her with a crash. "What are you saying? You animal!" she screamed, voice cracking into a high, ragged squeal. "How dare you blame me?" "You forced me!" "You!" She rushed forward, shoving past the table, and dropped to her knees beside Tavarius. She pushed him aside with her shoulder, hard, to get closer to me. "Mama, don't listen to him," she babbled, grabbing my good hand in both of hers. Her palms were icy, clammy. "He's a monster, a tyrant." I was terrified of him. He hit me too, not just you. He threatened to kill us both if I didn't stay quiet. I wanted to call 911 that night. I reached for the phone, but he ripped the cord out. I cried all night. I wanted to help you, Mama. I swear, tears streamed down her face. Real ones now, born of panic rather than performance. Mascara carved black rivers over her cheeks. I'm your daughter, your baby girl. I love you. Save me from him. Tell Governor Thorne I'm a victim. Please. I looked down at them, both on their knees now, clawing at my mercy like starving animals at a scrap. One a stranger who had married into my life for convenience and cash. The other, the child I had carried, nursed, raised through fevers and heartbreaks and teenage storms. How had we arrived here? At what exact moment had my little Havisha, the girl who once brought me dandelions from the yard and called them Mama Flowers, become this hollow, terrified creature willing to sacrifice her own mother for comfort? I gently but firmly pulled my hand from her grasp. The pain in my broken arm flared, a sharp reminder that sentiment could not override fact. Havisha, I said. She froze, hope flickering in her swollen eyes. You are lying. The words landed softly. Her mouth opened in shock. Mama, you didn't want to call the doctor. I cut her off, voice harder now, the voice I once used in the operating theater when a resident hesitated at a critical juncture. I remember every minute of that night. I leaned forward slightly, holding her gaze. I lay on the hallway floor for hours, moaning, bleeding inside where no one could see. Tavarius was in the kitchen drinking water, pacing, muttering about his debts. I paused. And you? Her pupils dilated. You stood over me. You didn't cry. You leaned down close enough that I could smell your perfume, and you hissed in my face. Shut up, old fool. Shut up. The neighbors will hear. You're embarrassing us. Havisha recoiled as though slapped. The flush of shame never came. She simply grew paler, impossibly pale, until she looked almost translucent. She opened her mouth. No words emerged. You weren't afraid for me, I continued, relentless. You were afraid of scandal, afraid the neighbors would call the police, afraid it would hurt Tavarius's career, and therefore your cars, your clothes, your dinners at overpriced restaurants. You chose comfort, Havisha. Not your mother. She lowered her head. Tears dripped onto the floor, silent now. There was nothing left to say. A short, sharp vibration broke the stillness. Cassius reached into his jacket pocket without haste. His phone screen glowed blue in the dim light. He read the message. The corner of his mouth lifted, not in joy, but in the grim satisfaction of confirmation. The audit moves quickly, he said dryly. Digital footprints are harder to erase than blood. He set the phone face down on the table. Then he looked at Tavarius, who had gone unnaturally still. Turns out your gambling debts are only the visible part of the iceberg, Tavarius. He spoke almost conversationally. My people didn't stop at your accounts. They went deeper. Properties under your management, including the basement of this very building, a registered historical landmark. Tavarius stopped breathing. His eyes bulged. Cassius continued, tapping one finger slowly on the table. On paper, janitorial storage. In reality, my team is down there right now. Crates, counterfeit luxury bags, untaxed cigarettes, stolen electronics, enough to stock a small black market operation. He shook his head. The disappointed teacher again. You didn't just assault a retired surgeon. You turned the home of the woman who saved my life into a trap house. A criminal warehouse. Tavarius whimpered. Cassius raised his eyes to the major. Major. The officer stepped forward. Two guards materialized from the shadows, synchronous, mechanical. They seized Tavarius under the arms. He jerked once feebly. Cuffs clicked shut. Professional. Tight. No, Governor Thorne. We can work this out, he squealed, twisting in their grip. I'll talk. I'll give up the suppliers. Please, don't take out the trash, Cassius said quietly, turning toward the window. The guards dragged him. His feet scraped across the hardwood, bunching rugs. He screamed, begged, threatened lawsuits, connections, revenge. The words faded as they pulled him through the foyer, through the same door he had opened so proudly 10 minutes earlier. The front door slammed. Heavy oak. Final. Like a judge's gavel.